It is my pleasure today to introduce Bishop Jimmy Nunn, who has come to share the good news with us. And we're so glad that he is here and that you are our bishop. And Bishop Nunn, I will turn this over to you. Aaron, we're on the same page.
Thank you, Ron. Indeed, I hope we're on the same channel. Not only in terms of microphones, but especially on the same spiritual channel. It's great to be with you all today, and I want to wish you a happy birthday. You look pretty good. You'll be 65. I'm looking at the mirror, and it's getting closer every day for me. But I won't tell you how far away I am from it, and I'm in denial about it too. So anyway, here we go. I'm convinced that the future of the church is tied to our understanding of our mission. Not missions, the things we do, but our mission. The difference we're called to be, the purpose we have for existence, and what we're all about. That is key and central to the future. I've got 3 questions I want to raise for us today, and I want you to think about them because they're all pretty profound questions. They can be simply answered, and yet the answers are not simplistic or in some way so simple. The first question is simply, who are we now? I've heard the history being recounted, and I realized that who we were in the past was a little bit different. We started on a dirt road or an unpaved road. I'm from West Texas. All roads out there that aren't paved are dirt roads. And one of the things, I've been in Oklahoma about a year, I've learned this as well. Y'all have an accent. So anyway, those 2 things I know. But anyway, we started out here on the dirt road today. That road is not dirt. It's paved. It's 4 lanes. There's a median that you've got to turn just right or you're going to be in the wrong parking lot and all that good stuff. Who are we now? That is a good question to ask. The second one, it goes along with it. Who is our neighbor now? Our neighbors change. Neighborhood changes. We change. Whenever I first moved into the house I lived in Lubbock, we had neighbors next door. They had teenagers. I was happy they were grown. Then I had teenagers. Now mine are grown, and now they've got teenagers again because it's a different family. We change. Our neighbors change. Things change. When I was driving over here today, I usually put on the GPS. I'm in North Oklahoma City. And put in the GPS, and I kind of knew the way here. It took me the wrong way, but I followed it anyway. And it wasn't the wrong way. It was probably a better way. It's the way I've never come. So I came on North 10th this way after getting off of 35. So I expected to see nothing but houses and buildings. And I didn't see a thing like that. So, I'm thinking, wow, who is our neighbor now? I kind of came down the road here from north to south. Noticed a lot of new buildings, all that kind of stuff. Who is our neighbor? Really, the key question is the third question. What difference do you believe that God is calling you to make in this next chapter of your life? That's both an individual and a corporate question. What difference do you believe God is calling you to make in this next chapter of your life? Now, I did hear some wonderful things. We are debt-free. Can anybody say amen to that? Amen. Can anybody say, I want to borrow more money about that? I didn't think so. I get the same kind of response when I say, can I preach 5 more minutes? So anyway, it's like there's nothing there. It's just quiet, and I miss a good opportunity to quit. I understand that we've got all the air conditioning up to date. We're in the middle of a capital campaign, and that's great. It's a campaign, though, that makes a difference. We're not just in the business to raise money so we let it stack up on us. We're here to make a difference in the world. We're going to make a difference in the lives of people. Our three questions call us to reflect upon where we are at this point in the history of our church and our journey. And this text that Jesus read is one that I think is very appropriate for the day. When I was young, I knew that Jesus came to earth to die on the cross and to then be raised from the dead. And so when I first read these texts, and I was a younger person then, I thought, somebody said this was Jesus' purpose in ministry, and I thought, no, it wasn't. It was for, he came to die on the cross, not to do all that other stuff. But I realized that Jesus' life and ministry was divided at least into three parts. There's the beginning, there's the middle ministry, and then there's the death and resurrection. And for that middle chapter, if you will, this verse, the verse in Luke, outlines for us what Jesus viewed his ministry to be about. Now, if I'd have had any sense today, since I'm in St. Matthew, I'd have picked a text from St. Matthew. But I've learned from the other two services, y'all read St. Luke here too. So, is that good? We're going to go with it today, whether it is good or not. So anyway, the first thing I want to notice out of this is that the purpose is rooted in the call of God on Jesus' life. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. That's another way of saying God has called me. God has directed me. God is leading me to do a series of specific actions that Jesus is asked to do. Jesus says to us that he'll be preaching good news to the poor, proclaiming freedom to the captives, enabling recovery of sight to the blind, and proclaiming liberty to the oppressed. These are action steps that make specific differences in the life of Jesus. And then finally, Jesus indicated now is the time. He said, today the Scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. Today is the year of the Lord. Today is the day we ask, who are we now? Today is the day to ask, who is our neighbor? Today is the day to ask, what difference is God calling us to make in this next chapter of our life? It is today. We've got to be really clear on our purpose, because the world around us has given us a bunch of purposes and statements and things that really aren't us. There's a lot of skepticism about the call of God, and people who say, God spoke to me. Don't you have a little suspicion about that? It sounds like it's sort of, can it be true? But it informs the church, this skepticism informs the perspectives the world around us has on the church today. I want to give you an example. 1899, a fellow whose name was Charles Duvel ran the United States Patent Office. And somebody attributed a quote to him. Here he's the leader of the Patent Office, and he supposedly said, we should close the United States Trade Office because everything that can be invented has been invented. Well, that sounds a little short-sighted and foolish, and it's always fun to try to find somebody who says something kind of dumb, especially in retrospect. And Mr. Duvel sure fit that bill. But I thought, before I tell his story, I probably better find out first, is it true? So I turned to that master of research, the all-knowing master of research called Google. And it turns out that quote came into existence not in 1900, but in 1980. There's no way Charles Duvel said those words. The source of the quote actually came from a comic book of that era. And well, it's not a real comic book. Real comic books have pictures, and comic books from that era didn't have pictures. But here's how the joke went. It says a genius came into the patent office. He was looking for somebody in authority. He saw a young man who was a clerk and said, isn't there a clerk here who can examine patents? And the boy replies, quite unnecessary, sir. Everything that can be invented has been invented. So a quote from the comic book gets attributed to a government official. Aren't you glad that just happened in the last millennium? Well, that happens to the church today too. How do we overcome false narratives about the church? Like, we're just in this for the money, or we're just wanting to feather our own nests, or we just do this stuff because we want to feel good, or stuff like that. All of that stuff is a narrative about the church, and the church is filled with hypocrisy and people who say one thing and do the other and all that kind of stuff. Well, we've got to look to Jesus and find our purpose. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. That's the mark of the life of a Christian. Are there points in our lives where we can identify, I know God was here. I know God was present in this day and in this way and in this time, and we can feel in our hearts the real difference that God was making, and money couldn't buy it, and it couldn't be recreated. It was a spiritual event where God worked in a magnificent way to change and to give purpose and meaning to our lives. So what difference did the Spirit make on Jesus? What was He called to do? Well, He was called to preach good news to the poor. It's easy to look at poverty as just dealing with material poverty. And there's a good bit of that around. In this metro area, there's a high degree of poverty. In the state of Oklahoma, there are counties, 3 or 4 counties, that are among the poorest in the whole country. That's alarming. But I do want to say, one of the things that impressed me the most upon coming to Oklahoma was the dedication that Methodists have to address the poverty in this state. What can we do to break that cycle? We've been working on that. We do work on that. I hope you noticed the offering card that addresses that. It's a little bitty piece. It's a step at a time. But there's more than one kind of poverty that can be equally devastating. A spiritual poverty is one. We live in a day when poverty is on the rise and spiritual poverty is on us. It creeps up on us in subtle ways. It says Christianity doesn't have anything really to offer the world. It's just a political movement. It says we're too busy in our lives for God. It says that the good news of the gospel is really no hope. These kind of things come from people who are experiencing spiritual poverty. And I've heard examples of that in the church, so I'm not just talking about people out there somewhere. A pastor friend of mine, whose name is Ruth, told me about a person that she had worked with, a very poor person. And that person asked Ruth to pray for her. And so Ruth said, "What is your name?" And I forgot if it was a man or a woman, but anyway, they said, "Here was my name." And so Ruth began to pray, and she called this person by name. And whenever that person being prayed for heard their name called, they began to weep and to cry, and something moved in their heart. And Ruth said, "What's this all about?" And so the person said to my pastor friend, Ruth said, "No one for my whole life has ever called my name to God before." We are called to pray for people and to help people address and overcome spiritual poverty. I learned a few years ago, I used to be kind of shy about this, but if somebody needs prayer, I'll stop in the middle of the hallway and pray for them. People can just go around, I don't care. But it's like we are here, we're in this place, we're in the church to address the spiritual needs of people, and when we forget that, we become the ones most impoverished. Jesus also came to proclaim release to the captives. Another one of our troubling statistics as a state is the high rate of incarceration. In fact, if it's true this year, we lead the nation in the number of women who are in jail. I guess I should have looked that up again before coming. It's not really a statistic that warms my heart very much, though. We're third in the whole nation of the number of people who are in prison somewhere. But I'm proud again of the United Methodists that are doing work to help people address those structural chains that bind us and imprison us and put families and generation after generation in jail. Ruins lives. Not all prisons have bars. There's a prison of addiction. There's prison of despair. There's prison of depression. There's prison of discouragement. There's a prison of loneliness. There's a prison of meaningless. There's a prison of isolation. There are all kinds of prisons around us that debilitate people. And Jesus came to proclaim freedom from the chains. We sang that hymn today. My chains fell off. My heart was free. Thank God. One time somebody came to see me. They had just gotten out of prison, and I had from a violent event of some kind. I'm not sure what it was, but this person, his name was Lonnie. He came and he told me that he had just come from a place where somebody had held a .38 caliber pistol to his temple. And I could look at that man and just see the blood vessels just sticking out all over his head. He was in such a trauma. I listened to him. I talked to him. We at that time I was in a large church with a big cathedral, a lot of stained glass, all this magnificent building and all this stuff. And I told him, just come and I'll pray with you and pray to God and ask God to come and be here. And he knelt down at the altar and he said these words, I'll never forget them. Lord, I hope you're here. That's why people come to church today. People don't just come to visit. People don't just come to show up and be seen. People don't just come so they miss the kickoff at 12, which you might today. People don't just come to eat. People come because we need to know God is here in this place in a way that makes a difference to my life. That's why people come. So what difference is God calling you to make in this chapter of your life? At least a portion of it is to be a place so filled with the Spirit and the power of God that when people walk in this place and say, Lord, I hope you're here, that God touches and changes our lives and does not leave us the same. Come, Holy Spirit, and may that be true in this place today and every single day for as long as we live. Come, Lord Jesus. Jesus proclaimed recovery of sight to the blind. He proclaimed freedom from oppression as well. And you know, I'm almost going to go into that, but we're having lunch after this is over. And y'all look hungry. And I don't want you to have stewed preacher for lunch either, so, you know. But Jesus talked about these four things, that was His purpose. And if that was Jesus' purpose, how much more should it be our purpose as a church? Our purpose is not to get rich. It's not to just grow big. It's not to build buildings. It's not to borrow or pay off money. It's not to keep stuff done. It's to be a spiritual presence that's strong and transforms the lives of people in this community and around the world. Come, Lord Jesus, and help us. So who are we now? Who is our neighbor now? And what difference is God calling us to make in this next chapter of our lives? Come, Lord, and show us the way. Let's pray. God, today we pray that your presence would be among us and with us as we seek with all of our hearts to find anew who we are today, who we are now, who our neighbor is now, and to discern the difference that you are calling us to make now. And so grant us, Lord, the spiritual insight and the spiritual tools that we may be effective in proclaiming and living out the grace of God. The grace of God that helps the oppressed be free. The grace of God that helps the blind to see. The grace of God that sets the prisoner free. Come, Lord Jesus God. We pray in your holy name.